Hi, welcome to another video from Toga Tech. My name's Dave. If you've seen any of my previous videos, you can see I've been looking for the best autopilot to use with Microsoft Flight Sim 2020. The larger aircraft like the Airbus A320 and the Boeing 747 seem to lack realism because a lot of the control functions are still not mapped out yet. So these are some of my previous builds. As you can see here, this is based on the Airbus A320, and this one is a general aviation one that I've built. I'll leave a link to the videos on those so you can watch them. Recently I've been flying the Baron G58, which I quite enjoy, and that uses the Garmin G1000 Autopilot. So I thought, well, as my laser's still broken, my laser cutter's still broken, I blew that one up, why not 3D print a Garmin G1000 Autopilot? So I went online, had a look round, and I found these files on Thingiverse. They're by a guy who calls himself Flight Sim Maker. I'll leave a link in the description where you can see that. And basically they're just genius, these. I've printed these out already. I won't bore you with the time lapse, but I've printed these out on my Anycubic i3 Mega 3D printer. And these are the parts here. You can see that's the what would be the left hand side with all the autopilot functions on it. This is the right hand side with the FMS, flight management systems, on there. This is my little dog who's come to say hi. Say hi, Lily. This is the base plate for it, and that's the top. Now you can see all these little individual holes here are for momentary tactile switches, and he's even got the files here for all the little buttons. I've printed them all out on a raft here, but I'll cut these all out individually and glue them to the tactile switches after I've painted them. And that's the autopilot side, that's the FMS side. Sorry, that's the FMS side. These are all the little triangle buttons that go along the base of the G1000. And what's so clever, this guy is so clever, I tell you, he's printed out these, which he calls PCB boards, but what they are, they're holding plates for the tactile switches. This obviously goes along the back of this plate here, and what you do is you put your little tactile switch in there, and glue that in place with the 4 holes for the tabs of the switch to come through. Then you can solder your wires to them, and that holds them in exactly the right position to fit behind this plate. Absolute genius, I tell you. It's done one for the autopilot side, the FMS, the 2 little transfer buttons for the comms. All of that's on there. I'll leave a link in the description below for that. But it is absolutely fantastic. And the plan behind this is, once this is all glued up, it leaves a 10-inch. You can do it in either 10 or 12 inches. Now I've done mine as a 10-inch display because I've got an old Galaxy tablet which I'm going to strip down and use for the screen to fit inside this. Okay, well that's enough of the talk through. What I'm going to do now is clean these parts all up and then paint them. Okay, let's get on with the build. Right, unfortunately something went wrong with the audio when I was recording this video, so I'm going to have to do a little voiceover for this section. As you can see, these are all the parts that have been 3D printed for the Garmin G1000. I've cleaned them all up and given them all a spray over, 2 coats of Plasticoat black spray paint. Now there are still some layer lines visible but I did actually have the printer set on draft mode, so I'm not really concerned about that. Obviously if you set your 3D printer to fine, you'll have less of the layer lines showing, or you could sand them down, but I didn't want to lose the detail in the control buttons and knob labels on there, so I'm quite happy with that. 2 coats of, as I said, plaster coat black matte spray paint. You can see the raised detail here for the headings for each of the encoders, and the idea is the reason why you have it in the white PLA and spray it black is when you rub that paint off, those control knob indicators or labels will show through in white. Well, that's the theory. Anyway, right, we're going to start with trying to put this together. I think probably the best option here is to scrape away the black paint. Here I'm using a nail, what do they call them? I don't know. For your fingernails, or sanding or buffing brush. I find this works very well with plastics. Just wife's probably wondering where they're all going missing. Just lightly sand. I mean, you can mask this off just to be careful that you don't scratch the surface, but if you just do it gently, you can just remove the first 2 layers of paint to reveal the white PLA underneath. I think it looks quite good. It's not perfect, but it makes it more authentic. It looks as though the buttons are worn through repeated use. Right, I'm going to spin through this section because you've got the general gist of what's going on here. Wow, well that's taken me about an hour to do all of these, but the finished results I'm really pleased with. As you can see, all the the headings and all that all showing through nicely in the white PLA from underneath the black spray. There's the diamond shaped buttons, the autopilot, the FMS and the 2 side panels. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to glue everything together. So top rail, which will I'm just going to use a bit of CA glue and glue these pieces together. Just check that all the support material has been removed, because otherwise it won't fit squarely into that hole. And just use a little file just to sand it down. You can see it's a little bit tight there, but it yeah, it seems to have pushed in nicely. Just try the other side. Yeah, oh, that goes in lovely, better than the other one. So a little bit of CA glue on there, and we'll stick these together. So now that the frame is all glued together, this is the idea really. This is my old Galaxy 10-inch tablet. The idea behind it is I'm going to mount that behind this panel and use that as an additional monitor through the software to display the primary flight display, the PFD, for the G1000. Hopefully that will work, but we'll continue with the build and hopefully that will work. Now I'm trying to keep these videos as short as possible, but if you have any questions or any suggestions, please drop me a line, drop me a note in the comments. Let me know if you're enjoying these videos or not. But yeah, I'm trying to keep the length to a minimum, so I'll be speeding through a lot of the build. But if you've got any questions about it, please let me know. Right, here are the parts that the guy Flight Sim Maker who designed this refers to as the PCBs. They're actually just plastic strips with a series of holes drilled in them that will fit for the tactile, mini tactile switches. This is one here. I think it's a 6mm by 6mm tactile switch. I had some other ones, but yeah, let's just check that. But yeah, it's about a 6mm square tactile switch. And these, so these are the 10mm ones, they're too large for that. But these 6mm ones fit just perfectly. It's got the 4 legs on the back there, and they just straddle across and fit into those holes. Fit in there perfectly, just a dab of glue just to hold them in place. There we go, and then the legs show through the back where you can then solder up the wiring. So let's work our way through those and add all our tactile switches to our boards. That's the Autopilot board and the FMS board. These are the 2 transfer button boards, the little ones. So yeah, I'm just going to work my way through that. Now all we've got to do is repeat the process with the other 2 panels, the Autopilot panel and the FMS, with these little 6mm square tactile switches. Okay, here we are continuing with our Garmin G1000 project build. Now I printed out all the buttons on rafts to keep them together, but it has turned out to be a bit of a problem because my raft adhesion to the buttons is quite strong, and I don't know if my tolerances are out, but when you insert the buttons Here's some of the buttons here. This is for the FMS. I've sanded down the backs as much as possible, rounded them, tidied them up a bit. I've also filed out the slots, the holes a little bit as well, because the tolerances on my printer obviously differs from the tolerances of the original files. So anyway, we're going to insert the buttons into the back of the FMS here. Let's just prop that up so we can get our buttons through the back. Right, so this is our FMS here, the back of our FMS, and we're going to put in the buttons here in the order they go. So if I can remember roughly, it's best to have a little reference picture up, which would help. Let me see. Right, okay, so on the inside we start with this one, which is that button there. That goes on the inside top. Then the FPL flight plan is the next one down, and then the enter button is the third one. Insert that in there. You just got to make sure that these are free when you push them from the face here. They'll move up and down easily. The clear button is the bottom one there. Procedures button there, and last the menu button. There we are. So that's all of them in there. And again, with my tolerances, if we get the circuit board for the FMS here, which is this, it's the FMS circuit board, when you position that on there, now it shouldn't press the buttons when you fix that down. They should only be depressed when you push the buttons from the front. But I can see, look here, I've got a little gap there, and if I was to push that flush, it presses the buttons. That's my tolerances on my printer file. You'll probably find the depth of this should have been 5mm, but it's probably only about 4 when it prints out with my printer. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a couple of spacers in between here before I glue this down. And I've got a couple of little nuts here I'm going to use as spacers. Just glue those in place before I glue the whole panel down. So a little bit of glue on there. I mean, if you've got small enough screws, you can probably screw these down. I think that's what they were intended for. That's why there's holes there. But I haven't got any screws that small. Let's just pop that little there. Do the 4 corners of that panel. You might find you've got better tolerances when you do your printout, and you won't need to do this. Should have checked the tolerances on my print first. But hey ho, live and learn. So that just gives me a little bit of a space between my buttons and my board. So then that board will then stick to that, and then that will be that first one in place. Just let that glue go off. Again, get yourself some Sino activator, which I keep telling myself I must do. But yeah, as you can see, these are the buttons on the rafts, but they don't separate from the raft very well. If I try and pull that off, you can see it still leaves a bit on the back. That's to do with my prints, nothing to do with the file, it's to do with my printing. So it still leaves that bit of raft stuck on the back of that button, so I have to try and cut that away or sand it down. because that's what's making it too thick, I think. I have sanded down the others, but it still didn't solve the problem. So you have to try and cut that back of that raft off, and then you end up damaging the button. But yeah, look, so you have damaged the button. So I'm going to just sand all of these down with a little bit of grit. Just sand them all flat, curve the corners off a bit, make sure that they fit in the holes properly before you connect up your circuit board. So that's going to take time to go off there. Have I got anything to clip it in place with? Because I don't think holding it's going to... So once that's in place there, your FMS board, make sure you got it the right way up. The big gap goes to the top. See, that glue hasn't gone off yet. Glue on there. Then that just sticks on there. The way he's done the files, he's got the holes that perfectly line up, so it keeps the circuit board in line with the buttons for when you screw it in place. Just push that back a bit, get that straight, yeah, like that. You just need to hold that until the glue sets. Oops. Oh dear. So this is where the activator will come in handy. Well, I've sanded down all the buttons, just rounded them off, smoothed them out a bit, just checked that they all fit in now, and placed them all in their corresponding positions. So if you can see that, let's bring that forward a little bit. Oh, up a bit. There we go. Move this towards there. There we go. Okay, now this one I've glued in and just taped up until the glue sets, and on each one I've put these little spacer nuts in because of the tolerances on my back switches there. Just move that out so the switches stay flat. So all I'm doing now is taking the PCB boards that I've made and gluing them into position above the buttons there, and taping them up with a little bit of masking tape just to hold them in position while they dry. So right, well I've glued them in with a bit of super glue, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to back that up with a bit of hot glue just to tack them in places, just to give it that added strength. And that, so let's do that. few little tack bits with some hot glue. On that side, get round to here, this side. It'll also take out that flexing where I've got the spacers in there. The plates are not sitting flush against the panel, so you get a little bit of flexing, which you don't need if you've got a switch there. So this will hopefully take out the flexing in that. Sure, when you make yours, you'll make sure that your tolerances are okay and your plates will sit flat. So a big thank you to all my new subscribers. Thank you for subscribing. If you've got any questions or any suggestions, please drop me a comment. Also, you can send me some pictures of your builds if you've decided to have a go at this. Let's see if I can just spin this around a second so I can do the other side. Like that for now. Okay, we just let that set for. Okay, well there we have it. That's the Garmin G1000, the front in. All the buttons are in, and I don't know if you can hear that. All functioning push buttons. That's it from the rear. All the buttons are glued in, wired up. Next part will be the rotary encoders. Well, that's it for part one. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. In part two, we'll be dealing with the rotary encoder part of this project to complete the Garmin G1000. Well, thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you next time on Toga Tech.